Today we're diving deep into the Let Them theory by Mel Robbins, a book built around two of the simplest words in the English language. Words that, once you actually learn to use them, quietly dismantle most of the anxiety, resentment, and exhaustion you carry around other people. Here's the problem this book solves. Think about how much of your mental energy goes toward things you don't actually control. Whether your friend texts you back, whether your coworker likes you, whether your family approves of the life you're building, whether a stranger's opinion of your body, your choices, your parenting, your career, is kind or cruel. We spend years, sometimes decades, trying to manage, influence, and control other people's thoughts, feelings, and behavior, as if enough effort could finally make them think, feel, or act the way we need them to. And every single time it fails, because you were never able to control another human being in the first place. You just didn't know that yet. Mel Robbins says the moment she truly understood this wasn't in a therapy session or a research paper. It was standing in a parking lot at her son's high school graduation party, watching almost nobody show up, feeling the old instinct rise up in her to fix it, to call people, to manage the disappointment for everyone in the room. Her daughter turned to her and said two words that changed the trajectory of her life. Let them. Let them not come. Let them have other plans. Let them be who they are, without you spending your one evening trying to manufacture a different outcome out of thin air. That's the entire philosophy in two words, followed immediately by a second phrase that completes the equation. Let them and then let me. Let them think what they think, do what they do, feel what they feel. And then let me decide how I respond, what I build, who I become, regardless of what they chose. The first phrase releases your grip on other people. The second phrase hands all of that reclaimed energy back to you, where it actually belongs. What makes this book land so differently than most self-help advice is that Robbins isn't handing you a new discipline to master or a 5-step framework to memorize. She's naming something you've probably been doing your entire life without realizing it had a name. The quiet, constant labor of trying to manage other people's inner worlds as though it were your responsibility. The exhaustion so many of us carry isn't from doing too much. It's from trying to do something that was never actually possible in the first place, and never noticing that the job itself was the problem. There's a reason this idea has spread the way it has, showing up in therapy sessions, dinner table conversations, and comment sections full of people saying some version of the same thing. I didn't know how much energy I was spending on this until I stopped. That's the promise of this book, not a personality overhaul, just the return of energy you didn't know you were losing. Over the next half hour, we're going to walk through exactly how this plays out, in friendships, in family, in grief, in the quiet war you might be fighting with your own self-doubt. This isn't a book about giving up on people or stopping caring. It's a book about finally putting your effort somewhere it can actually make a difference, starting with yourself. Before we get into it, if you're someone who genuinely loves books like this, ideas that don't just entertain you but actually change how you move through your relationships and your own mind, it would mean a lot if you hit subscribe, tap that like button, and turned on notifications. This channel exists for people who want to think more clearly and live more intentionally, and there's a lot more of that coming. Alright, let's get into it. The control trap and the mechanic of letting go. Let's start with the trap itself, because Robbins argues that almost all of our unnecessary suffering comes from a single deeply human miscalculation. We believe somewhere below conscious thought that if we just try hard enough, explain clearly enough, or care visibly enough, we can control how other people think, feel, and behave. So we over-explain ourselves to people who've already made up their minds. We chase friends who've quietly drifted away. We rehearse arguments in the shower, trying to control a conversation that hasn't even happened yet. We scroll through a message we sent an hour ago, willing the other person's response into being through sheer anxious attention. None of that effort works, and here's the part that stings: it was never going to work, because you were trying to operate a set of controls that were never wired to your hands in the first place. Other people's opinions, choices, timing, and feelings belong entirely to them. This isn't a metaphor. It's closer to a law of physics. And the moment Robbins names this out loud, something clicks, because most of us have spent our whole lives quietly exhausting ourselves trying to override it. This is where the mechanic of the theory comes in, and it's built to be almost absurdly simple, because Robbins wants you to be able to use it in the middle of a stressful moment, not after a week of journaling about it. The instant you feel that familiar tightening, the urge to control, convince, fix, or manage someone else's behavior, you say two words to yourself. Let them. Let them be late. Let them not text back. Let them have the opinion. Let them make the choice you wouldn't make. Saying it isn't resignation. It's a release valve. It interrupts the automatic reflex to grab the wheel of someone else's life, and it hands that grip back to reality, where it was sitting the entire time whether you acknowledged it or not. But letting go by itself can feel hollow, even a little bit like giving up, which is exactly why Robbins pairs it with a second phrase that most people miss on the first pass. Let me. Let them cancel plans, and let me decide whether I still go out and enjoy my evening anyway. Let them judge my choices, and let me keep making them, because they're mine to make. Let them not show up for me, and let me finally notice who does. The let them half releases your grip on someone else's behavior. The let me half redirects every ounce of that reclaimed attention back onto the only life you actually have jurisdiction over, your own. Robbins ties this to something the research on stress and control backs up clearly. Your brain's threat response, the amygdala firing, the racing thoughts, the tight chest, doesn't actually distinguish between a real emergency and the imagined threat of someone disapproving of you. When you try to control someone else's reaction, your nervous system treats it exactly like an unsolved danger, because in a very real sense, it is one. It's a problem you can never fully close the loop on. Letting them, and letting go of the need to control the outcome, is often the only thing that actually calms that alarm down, because it removes an unsolvable problem from your plate entirely. Robbins offers a small, almost embarrassingly relatable example that shows how automatic this control reflex has become. Picture waiting for someone to text back. You reread your own message, wondering if it sounded needy. You check your phone every few minutes, as if watching it will somehow influence a decision happening in someone else's head, on someone else's schedule. That entire loop is an attempt to control something you have zero access to. The moment you say let them, the compulsion loosens, not because you suddenly stop caring, but because you've stopped assigning yourself a job that was never actually yours to do. And what fills that space, if you let it, is the let me. Let me put the phone down. Let me get back to my own evening. Let me stop auditioning for a role in someone else's decision-making process. There's a deeper reason we cling to this illusion of control in the first place, and Robbins names it plainly. Control feels like safety. If I can just manage how this person sees me, or steer how this situation unfolds, then I'm protected from the pain of a bad outcome. But that safety was always fake, a story your nervous system tells itself to feel less powerless in a world that is, by nature, largely outside your grip. The relief people describe after adopting this practice isn't relief from caring less. It's relief from finally putting down a role, full-time manager of other people's inner lives, that was never sustainable and never actually protected them from anything in the first place. There's a related habit Robbins names that most people don't even clock as control, giving unsolicited advice. It feels like generosity from the inside. You're trying to help, to spare someone a mistake you can already see coming. But underneath it is often the same reflex, a discomfort with letting someone else's life unfold on its own terms, without your input steering it. Let them figure it out their own way, even the slow way, even the way that looks like it's going to hurt a little. Let me offer help when it's actually asked for, and trust that people are allowed to learn things on a timeline that isn't mine to set. Relationships, comparison, and the fear of missing out. Now let's take this into the places it hurts the most, the relationships we actually care about, because Robbins doesn't stop at strangers and small annoyances. She points the let them theory directly at friendship, dating, and the quiet epidemic of comparing our lives to everyone else's highlight reel. Start with friendship. Most of us have, at some point, chased a friend who was pulling away. We overplan, overtext, overexplain, hoping that enough effort will restore something that's already shifted. Robbins is blunt about this. If someone wants to be in your life, they will be. Chasing doesn't create closeness, it just delays the discomfort of noticing that someone has already made their choice. Let them not respond right away. Let them get busy with a new job, a new relationship, a new season of life that doesn't include you as much anymore. And let me, in that space, notice who actually reaches back. Robbins argues that this single shift, from chasing to noticing, is one of the fastest ways to see your relationships clearly for the first time in years. The friends who were never going to leave reveal themselves. The ones who required constant management usually weren't built to last in the first place. Dating gets an equally direct treatment. Robbins describes the exhausting habit of trying to read a partner's texts for hidden meaning, decoding a delayed reply as if it were a puzzle with your worth hidden inside it. Let them take their time. Let them show you, through consistent action rather than promised intention, who they actually are. And let me pay attention to the pattern instead of the potential. This is one of the sharper insights in the book, that we often fall for who someone could become instead of who they're actually showing us, in real time, through their behavior. Let them be exactly who they are today. Let me decide, based on that, not on hope, whether this relationship deserves my continued investment. Then there's comparison, which Robbins treats almost like a modern epidemic. Social media puts a curated, edited version of everyone else's life directly in front of you, constantly, and your brain, not built for this kind of unrelenting exposure, quietly concludes that everyone else is doing better, happier, further along. You see the vacation photo and feel the sting of not being there. You see the promotion announcement and feel a flicker of your own stalled progress. Robbins calls this comparison triggering a scarcity response, your nervous system reacting to someone else's win as though it somehow depletes your own supply of good things. It doesn't. Someone else's happiness was never rationed from a pool you were both drawing on. The antidote, predictably, is the same two words. Let them post the vacation. Let them announce the promotion. Let them live a life that looks from the outside more polished than yours feels on the inside, because you are comparing your entire internal experience to someone else's highlight reel, and that comparison was always going to be unfair. And then let me close the app. Let me look at my own progress on its own timeline. Instead of racing against a version of someone else's life I only ever see the best 5% of. Robbins doesn't ask you to stop noticing what other people have. She asks you to stop treating it as evidence against you. There's a particularly honest moment in the book where Robbins talks about the sting of watching a friend succeed at something you've been quietly working toward yourself. The promotion, the book deal, the relationship that finally works. That flicker of jealousy can come with a wave of shame right behind it, because we're taught that good people feel only happiness for their friends. Robbins pushes back on that. You're allowed to feel both. Let them have their win fully, without you needing to shrink it, explain it away, or perform happiness you don't fully feel yet. And let me sit with my own timeline, without deciding that someone else's good news is a referendum on my own progress. The two feelings, admiration and a pinch of longing, can exist in the same breath, and neither one makes you a bad friend. Robbins also applies this directly to the fear of missing out, which she treats as one of the sneakier forms of the same control problem. You see a group photo from an event you weren't invited to, and the sting isn't really about the event itself. It's the story that spins up around it, a fear that you're being quietly phased out, judged, or forgotten. Let them have their night without you. Let them post about it. And let me trust that one gathering doesn't rewrite the whole relationship, and that my worth was never something an invitation could confirm or deny in the first place. The same logic applies in reverse, to the invitations you decline. Let them be disappointed that you said no to something that would have drained you. Let me protect my own time and energy without needing everyone's approval of that boundary first. Family, adult children, and the weight of other people's opinions. Family is where this theory gets tested the hardest, because the instinct to control the people we love the most is often the strongest instinct we have. Robbins writes candidly about parenting adult children, a chapter that seems to resonate especially deeply with her readers. When your child is young, guiding their choices is your job. But there's a moment, often earlier than parents expect, when that same instinct to guide quietly curdles into something closer to control, and it starts to cost you the relationship you're trying to protect. She describes the particular grief of watching an adult child make a choice you wouldn't make, a career path, a partner, a belief system, a distance they've put between themselves and home, and feeling the overwhelming pull to intervene, to explain why they're wrong, to save them from a version of a mistake you've already lived through. Let them make the choice. Let them learn the lesson on their own timeline, not yours. This one is genuinely hard, and Robbins doesn't pretend otherwise. But she argues that the alternative, continuing to fight for control over a grown adult's life, doesn't actually protect the relationship. It slowly corrodes it, replacing closeness with resentment on both sides. And the second half of the phrase matters enormously here too. Let me stay present. Let me keep the door open. Let me be someone they still want to call, even when they're not calling for advice. The same dynamic runs in reverse, toward aging parents. Robbins writes about the particular ache of watching a parent make choices about their health, their finances, or their independence that you disagree with, and the exhausting, often futile effort to control decisions that, legally and practically, were never yours to make. Let them decide. Let me love them anyway, without that love being conditional on them doing things my way. This same principle stretches into the workplace, where Robbins tackles something almost everyone quietly struggles with, the compulsion to manage what colleagues and bosses think of us. We rehearse how to phrase an email so nobody could possibly misread our tone. We replay a meeting, wondering if a comment landed wrong. We shrink our opinions in rooms where we actually have expertise, worried about being perceived as too much, too confident, too anything. Let them think what they think about your idea, your promotion, your pace of work. Let them have office politics and opinions about you that you'll never be able to fully manage or correct. And let me keep showing up, doing the work I'm proud of, instead of spending my limited energy trying to control a perception I was never going to be able to fully steer anyway. Underneath almost all of this sits one recurring insight Robbins keeps returning to, borrowed loosely from an old piece of wisdom she updates for a modern audience. What other people think of you is genuinely none of your business. Not because their opinions don't exist, but because chasing control over them is a job with no end date and no possible completion. The moment you stop applying for that job, an enormous amount of your energy quietly comes back online, available for something that will actually move your life forward. Robbins also touches on something almost everyone with a family recognizes instantly: the holiday table, or the family group chat, where an opinion about your life gets offered whether you wanted it or not. Your career choice, your relationship, your parenting, your weight, someone always seems to have a take. The old instinct is to defend, explain, or quietly seethe about it for the rest of the visit. Let them have the opinion. Let them say the comment. It costs you nothing to let a sentence exist in the air without picking it up and carrying it home with you. Let me choose what I actually engage with, and let the rest pass by like weather, present for a moment, gone by the time I'm back in my own car. The hardest version of this chapter, and Robbins treats it with real care, is watching someone you love struggle, with addiction, with mental health, with a pattern that's clearly hurting them, and feeling the desperate pull to fix it for them. This is where let them requires an important distinction. It is not the same as abandoning someone, and it's not permission to ignore genuine danger. What it does mean is recognizing the difference between supporting someone and trying to control their recovery on your timeline, through your methods, because you're the one who can't tolerate watching them struggle any longer. Let them be exactly where they are in their own process, even when it's agonizing to witness. Let me offer support, set honest boundaries, and take care of my own well-being alongside theirs, instead of making their healing something I try to manage from the outside in. Grief, uncertainty, and turning let me inward. Robbins doesn't limit this theory to the manageable, everyday frustrations of other people. She takes it somewhere heavier, into grief and loss, and this is where the book stops feeling like a productivity trick and starts feeling like something closer to philosophy. When someone we love dies, or a relationship ends, or an outcome we desperately wanted simply doesn't happen, part of what makes the pain so disorienting is the sense that we should have been able to prevent it, or fix it, or see it coming in time to change the ending. Robbins doesn't offer let them as a way to feel less about loss. She offers it as a way to stop adding a second layer of suffering on top of the first, the layer built from guilt over things that were never within your control to begin with. Let them go. Not because it stops hurting, but because carrying the illusion that you could have controlled an uncontrollable outcome only compounds grief with something crueler, a false sense of blame. And let me grieve fully, without also being on trial for a verdict that was never fair to reach in the first place. There's a similar tenderness in how she handles uncertainty and fear about the future. So much anxiety comes from trying to control outcomes that haven't happened yet and may never happen at all, rehearsing arguments that never occur, bracing for rejections that never come, grieving losses in advance just in case. Let them, in this context, becomes let the future unfold without your constant exhausting attempt to pre-control every branch of it. Let me handle what's actually in front of me today, and trust that I'll be capable of handling what shows up tomorrow, when it actually arrives, instead of 100 imagined versions of it in advance. And then Robbins turns the whole theory inward, toward the relationship most of us neglect the most, the one with ourselves. Because it turns out the person we try hardest to control, judge, and manage isn't always someone else. It's us. The relentless inner critic replaying an awkward comment from 3 years ago. The voice insisting you should be further along by now. The habit of speaking to yourself in a tone you'd never tolerate from another person. Let them hear becomes an invitation to let your own thoughts pass without treating every self-critical one as gospel truth. Let that anxious thought exist without obeying it. Let the self-doubt show up without letting it drive. Robbins extends the same compassion backward in time, toward the decisions you've already made and can no longer change. So many of us carry a quiet, ongoing trial against our past self, replaying the choice we should have made, the words we should have said, the year we feel we wasted. Let that version of you, the one who didn't know what you know now, off the hook. Let them have made the decision they made, with the information and the capacity they had in that exact moment. You cannot renegotiate the past by punishing yourself in the present. And let me use what that experience taught me, instead of staying handcuffed to it as evidence of some permanent flaw. This same permission stretches to something a lot of readers say hits closer than they expected, how we let strangers and even loved ones dictate how we feel about our own bodies. A comment about weight, an offhand remark about how you look, and suddenly your whole sense of self for the day is hijacked by someone else's passing opinion. Let them have a reaction to how you look. Let them think whatever they think about your body, your aging, your choices about your own physical self. None of it requires your agreement to be survivable, and none of it entitles them to a say in how you actually feel about yourself. Let me decide on my own terms what my relationship with my body gets to be, independent of the running commentary other people feel entitled to offer. And the let me that follows might be the most important one in the entire book. Let me talk to myself the way I'd talk to someone I love. Let me back myself, the way I'd back a close friend who was doubting themselves in front of me. Let me become, in Robbins's words, my own biggest fan, instead of my own harshest critic. Because if you're spending your energy trying to control everyone else's opinion of you while quietly tearing yourself down in private, you've built a system where you can never actually win. The theory only completes itself when it comes home, when the compassion you've been trying to extend to people who may not even notice gets redirected, finally, toward the one person who's been listening to every single thing you've said about yourself the entire time. So let's bring this all the way back together. If there's one idea from the let them theory worth carrying with you long after this video ends, it's this: almost everything that drains you comes from fighting for control you never actually had. The friend who pulled away. The family member who made a different choice. The stranger's opinion. The outcome that hasn't happened yet. None of it was ever yours to steer. And the exhausting effort you've been pouring into steering it anyway has been quietly borrowed from the one place it could have actually made a difference: your own life. The two words aren't a passive shrug. They're a redirect. Let them, so that you can finally let me. Let go of the wheel that was never connected to anything, so both your hands are free to grip the one that actually is. Here's the actionable piece to walk away with. The next time you feel that familiar tightening, the urge to fix, convince, chase, or control someone else's thought, feeling, or choice, pause and say the two words to yourself quietly, even just in your head. Let them. Notice the small release that follows. Then ask the second question immediately after. What do I want to let myself do now, with the energy I just got back? It might be small: closing the app, ending the rehearsed argument in your head, sending yourself the kindness you were about to withhold. Start there. The theory doesn't ask for a life overhaul. It asks for one honest pause, repeated enough times that it becomes the way you move through the world. Robbins is careful to point out, and it's worth repeating here, that this isn't about becoming detached or indifferent to the people in your life. It's the opposite. When you stop spending your energy trying to control who shows up, who approves, and who stays, you have far more of yourself left over to actually love the people who do show up fully, without the resentment that quietly builds when love gets tangled up with control. Letting them go isn't the end of connection. For a lot of people, it's the beginning of the first honest connection they've had in years, because it's no longer propped up by managing, chasing, or performing. If you take nothing else from this video, take the two words themselves, and try them this week in a real moment, with someone or something that's been quietly costing you energy. Notice what actually happens when you stop fighting for a kind of control you never had to begin with. Robbins offers one closing image that stuck with a lot of readers: the idea of two open hands. One hand releases, the other receives. You cannot actually do both with a clenched fist. As long as your hand is closed tight around someone else's choices, their opinions, their timeline, it has no room left to receive anything for yourself. Not peace, not clarity, not the energy to build the life you actually want. Let them is the part where the fist finally opens. Let me is what you get to place in that open palm once it does. If this video gave you something to sit with, I'd genuinely love to hear it. Drop a comment below with your favorite thought from today, the line that hit you hardest, and let's talk about it. And if you want more conversations like this one, thoughtful, unhurried, built around books that actually change how you live, come join us. Subscribe to the Mind Master, and let's keep learning to let go of what was never ours, so we can finally hold on to what is. I'll see you in the next one.